a show, and we are live, and we're gonna hit the intro.
This is not a show. It might not even be a connection. Here's Judah and Guest.
It's Judah and Guest, and it's me and Captain Blackburn chilling tonight, talking, keeping it real.
So I can't see the bottom of your shirt. It says "Trust me," and I see a picture of Yoda. A Jedi I am.
Jedi, I am. A Jedi, I am. I guess, yeah.
A Jedi I am.
It was the only green shirt I had. So here we are. We already have two people watching. We've got three. We've got Mr. Scott Pinot, who's already watching. Happy birthday, Mr. Pinot.
So you're wearing the orange hat and the green shirt, and I'm just not even. I'm not even dressed up for the occasion. So you got an Irish Catholic colored shirt.
Well, with a name like McNeil, I have to represent.
Yeah,
the Irish in me.
I do love St. Patrick. Not bad for a Brit.
St. Patrick was a Brit.
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that. Jim Pass in the house. By the way, I have a email. I got. Did you get the email too?
I did. I did.
I haven't.
I can't wait till my work situation changes April 1st, and it's like then I can get back to trading emails from Jim.
Yeah, Jim is so insightful and such a really everybody who tunes in, Scott and Jim Long and Jim Pass, and we have several people that Dr. Nass just really appreciate the insight we hear in the comments, and so and the feedback we get. I really appreciate Jim, taking the time to give us so much feedback. It's beautiful. Today we're going to talk about connection and forgiveness, and it's based off. So it's my turn to pick a topic. You kind of cheated last week.
I did.
And I kind of hijacked it with time talk, but
time travel.
Well, this week I want to the subject, and of course you can hijack, you can bring it wherever you want, but with the title "Forgiveness and Connection," I had we do a circle in our youth group and just go around talking, and we talk about the spirit. We talked about who are you connected, who do you feel, check in with your spirituality. Who do you feel connected with? And he said, I always feel connected to the people that I have to forgive. And I thought, I had never made a huge connection never made a that put those two things together. I think of forgiveness and I guess I should have, because that thing in reconciliation is that sweet spot of the spirit and forgiveness, right?
I think it can be. I mean, I can think of a handful of people that I've forgiven that I don't feel very connected to.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, by just either like distance or death or relationship circumstances where it's not reciprocated, right? And
right.
I can't make us connect. There's got to be some. It's reciprocal, though. Before we jumped on, it's like. But on the other hand, everyone I'm connected with, I've probably had some opportunity to forgive, and vice versa.
And it's impossible to be connected with somebody, right? It's impossible to have that spiritual connection, or in friendship or otherwise, without forgiveness. I feel if I'm harboring something against somebody or hiding sin, or like that, that's what disrupts that connection, right?
Yeah.
The lifeblood of the church,
I suppose. It'll only take maybe a more tentative stance, but I know I tend to agree that if we're unreconciled
Mm-hmm.
with another person, are we connected? And of course, you know, when we use that word connected, I mean, like,
Yeah.
what do you mean by that, Judah?
Yeah. Well, typically what I
I'd begin to
mean
tease that one out, because this is
is
not a connection, or barely a connection, or what is this show
barely.
again?
I
Oh,
can't
barely a
remember. It's not
connection.
a show. Um, yeah. To me, when I asked this, usually the students or in men's group, we ask each other to check in with our, different parts of us. We connect. We check in with physical, emotional, no, physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual pies. And the last one, spiritual, to explain it is to say, who do you feel connected with? Or if you're checking in spiritually, who do you feel disconnected with? And that means, do you feel disconnected with God? Do you feel disconnected with your spouse, your children, your friends? Do you feel connected in particular ways? And so to me, spirituality is about feeling connected in particular ways or disconnected, like that exists, disruption of spirituality, I think, though, within the realm of spirituality, the practical doings of it has to do with relational connection. The how, what does it look like? Questions comes down to me. Spirituality comes down to relational connection.
The doing of relational connection. Right.
Well, what else is there? I guess the experiencing of relational connection.
And I guess what I'm curious is, you know, teasing apart like spirituality versus connection as being synonymous, or are they differentiated in some capacity?
Well, to me, in the way I see it, there are those that speak of spirituality much as they do like time, in that it's some kind of
Or religion,
world in itself or frame or something.
stage, something
Now, I do believe in
reified.
spirits, but to me, spirituality is more when I really look at it and really think about it. What does it mean practically for me? Is not spirits floating around. It has to do with how, there's physical connection when you hug somebody, and you can feel a spiritual
Yeah,
connection in that, but there's also these connections that cannot be explained physically, and that's what I call spirituality.
such as.
Well, any connection we have with God
Okay.
is not physical. Any connection we have with people in which we're not touching, so it has a lot to do with communicating, and that's why I say relational. It's a
Yeah.
relationship thing. Is communicating and understanding. It's hard to explain connecting, except in the way that you've can I think we've all connected with somebody in some way. I like to think about it as what I tell I used to tell my groups, and I still do in youth group and stuff, is like, a lot of times people talk about it's in terms of sports, and so it doesn't always ring true with people that don't like sports, but you say you got good chemistry, those two they have really good chemistry. What does that mean? Well, it means they're connected on a spiritual level. They're in sync.
In sync, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe even they have good chemistry.
Well, what is that? It's spiritual.
Well, I mean, even on a biological level. Just throwing that one.
Well, that doesn't work, because information isn't plans are not transmitted physically or through physical or biologically. Plans have to be, knowledge has to be transmitted. It can be transmitted non-verbally, so that's a physical, I think, there's a physical component to it.
Oh, that's a deeply biological component.
I don't know why I'm wary of that. I don't mean to be, but I am. I don't know why. In the same way that you seem to be a sort of wary of calling that
time not
spiritual connection, huh? No. It seems to be like you're sort of shying away from calling it spiritual.
I'm
just teasing it out, right?
Yeah, just teasing it out. Yeah, you propose a subject, I'll tease it.
Yeah, we gotta. Speaking of that, Jim says, great to have Jim in the chat. Jim Pass says, as humans, we're connected through shared experiences.
Yeah. I'd say, yeah. We connect. I mean, we often connect in shared experiences.
Well, I guess, what does that mean, though? Are we talking about are we talking about connecting while we share an experience? Or are we connecting through having similar experiences that we both shared?
I think that's. I would hazard to say that both are true. However, I would want to put some pressure and lean on, like, connecting with another human through a mutually shared experience, or maybe even a shared encounter. I'm trying to, in my mind, come up with a situation where I would be knowingly connected with another human being where we did not share an encounter together.
An encounter, and that includes the immediate encounter, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a sense maybe in which, to use, the term from the book of Hebrews, this great cloud of witnesses, being connected with the whole of the body of Christ.
Yeah.
However, there's a sense in which that starts to, like, that while I can by faith grab hold of that, it's different than anyone that I have shared an interpersonal encounter with. As far as the quality of that connection, like, it's certainly, you and I have had spent time together, and even in this context, in a sense, like, we've had interpersonal encounters,
yeah,
all of us here together in ways.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Is the question that can somebody connect with somebody without any kind of shared experience
or encounter? Yeah.
Well, now, but see, that's the thing, though, is that we all have shared experiences as humans, right? Like, just being a human is a shared experience.
Yes.
And to me, that's why the Eucharist is so important, because it's one of those shared experiences that we all eat. We all know what it's like to hunger and satisfy that and drink. And so that could be an example of something when we come together. I may not know schmo, but as we take the cup and eat, the body of Christ, it's something we've all experienced before, eating and drinking.
It's certain that is certainly a shared experience.
But I know what you're saying, though, that there is something deeper.
Just teasing around with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think, though, like, the people I have the hardest time connecting with are the ones that are are the ones that are most unlike me and have the least shared experiences that I do. And that's why it's important to create shared experiences, right? And talk and find out that we have similarities no matter what walks
or
of life.
differences, right? I mean, that's why I guess I kind of lean towards that word encounter, because even like you encounter differences, right? Like we can all say, well, I love everyone, but that's an abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
We never,
we don't love everyone.
We never encounter everyone. We encounter our neighbor, who, kind of like the young man said, the people that I find that I get connected with are the ones that I have to forgive.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to connect with everyone. I'm still struggling to connect with my neighbor. If not on an initial level, on a deeper level.
Yeah.
On a more intimate level. To move from acquaintance to friends, or even, layers and colors and textures of relationship that don't fit well into some named category.
Well, and there's another aspect that I don't know how this fits in with forgiveness, but thankfulness. The people I'm thankful for, but that gets into my selfishness, right? Like forgiveness is selflessness. Thankfulness can, it's
I
not
don't know.
necessarily an evil thing.
I don't know if
evil
forgiveness is necessarily as altruistic as we think it is.
Yeah, say more about that, because I think
right. there's a lot of good reasons to forgive other people, not for their sake, but for your own. One, I think it's a duty that we have.
Yeah.
There's also like a, I don't even know the word I would want to use. We'll just say there is a divine imperative to forgive.
Yeah.
Because, we're called into that likeness of He who is long-suffering and forgiving.
Well, and there's, along with that is the generative nature of righteousness, right? The natural healthy result of righteousness is success, right? In the sense of,
or persecution. I mean, it just depends on the circumstances.
Well, persecution, but I'm talking about.
Sorry,
I'm talking about like
sometimes
the natural, immediate. You're right, but the immediate result of forgiveness is and being interconnected with people is typically you get things done. If everybody is
well, sure.
Then
no, I mean,
their success is
like
is not transmitted.
No, I mean, like just in general, it's certainly the grease, the collaboration, right? To forgive people for transgressions, both small and large.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, absolutely. No, it definitely. Though I think the difficult thing, like from a social perspective, is sometimes, I don't know, I put the onus on forgiveness on me rather than other people, and I guess my struggle is, I mean, do people really know how forgiven they are? Or for that matter, I look at forgiveness as a process. I talk with people about this all the time, because we have this notion of forgive and forget, and then I look at people and say, well, how good are you at forgetting? Because I don't. I just haven't quite seemed to master that. And what I've noticed in my life is every time I'm reminded of some transgression, it's just yet another opportunity to forgive. Again. And again. And again. And again. And just as part of being a human. Like, that's how it is.
Yeah.
And I tell people that because I think they do get very frustrated with, well, I forgave, but I'm having this trouble forgetting.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, I see you. Yeah, that is frustrating, that forgetting part, because it's only when you get really old and potentially senile that you begin to forget.
I don't know. I'm
In
not
that
a
kind of
great
way.
remember. What? I don't have a great memory. But I like what you're saying, though. There is too much emphasis on forgiveness being an action rather than a process. Yeah,
or
like
one-time
it's
event versus an
yeah,
ongoing, and it's an ongoing
right.
relationship. Like we're in relationship, so therefore I continue to forgive you. Um,
Yeah,
and that gets difficult because we can obviously find ourselves in relationships or situations where I can forgive you, but I don't necessarily need to live with you, or I can forgive you, but I don't necessarily need to work for you.
yeah.
Um, or like there can be a change in the nature of the relationship, but it doesn't change that a particular offense has been pardoned and forgiven, and um, so yeah, that gets sometimes a little
The
challenging.
dynamics and practical aspects of being in the same space as somebody else in
Hmm?
certain spaces is that needs to be worked out differently than our what is it, our orientation towards somebody, right? If we're like this to somebody rather
Yeah, well,
than
yeah,
yeah.
I'm not, yeah.
Jim says our the divine mandate is to forgive when forgiveness is sought. 1 John 1:9, not just unilateral handed out forgiveness to make yourself feel better.
Well, and I say not so much for the sake of feeling better, but I hear you, Jim.
I don't know about that. I'd have to
I,
look at 1 John 1:9 because
I'm
to
having to go look
me,
myself because I'm like,
I mean, I agree. I agree. It's not to feel better necessarily, but it is to be right with God. We cannot be right. You know, forgive those who've trespassed against me as you forgive. You know, what is it? Forgive
the
me as I forgive those who trespass against me.
or yeah, or debtors if you like that translation. Um,
There's a sense in which we cannot be forgiven unless we forgive. I don't think we have to forgive people only if they ask for forgiveness.
have
In
to
fact,
believe.
I think it isn't tied at all with people asking for forgiveness. Well, we do have to forgive people if they ask, if they if they point out an offense. Well, no, that's us. We point out offense in them, right?
Well, or I mean,
If somebody
I guess
offends you,
there's nothing talking. Yeah, if someone offends you, there's nothing stopping me from going, Judah. Hey, remember when you said whatever or did whatever? Hey, that offended me, and I forgive you.
was it about
Um,
time?
probably. There's probably something about time or time travel. You talk about time travel all the time. No,
Oh yeah,
no,
we need to talk about time
we're not
travel.
talking about time travel. You, I might entertain that for fun. Oh, I'm just kind of curious. It's making me have to go back and see.
Yeah, 1 John 1:9. I feel like I know.
I don't have my glasses on.
So you can't read 1 John 1:9?
I can once I get there and I can focus on the print.
What were you saying about? We confess
Well,
our sins. He's faithful and just, right? Is that what it's about? What do you have? What is the
well,
context?
see, I like to always start off early. Like I just don't read it.
Yeah,
So like
yeah. Get
if
get
we start at verse
earlier in there.
7, but if we
What
walk in the
context?
light as He is in the light, then we do have communion with one another, and the blood of His Son Jesus Christ cleanses us from all sin. If we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. Verse 9. If we confess our sins, He is faithful and righteous, so that He will forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. If we say that we have not sinned, we make Him a liar, and His word is not in us.
I think that goes back to what we were talking about in terms of walking in the light. The light of righteousness creates a space for us to live better.
It does.
What are you pondering there? What are you reading?
I'm pondering about the divine imperative for humans to forgive one another, and I'm wondering, I think to Jim's point, there really is especially when we're talking about connection. For there to be, it's a two-way street in the sense of it's one thing when you ask for forgiveness and receive forgiveness as opposed to it being unilateral. And maybe this is again talking about quality of connection. I may take exception to it. The only time that I can forgive somebody is if they ask for it. But to kind of get it closer to what we're talking about, I think Jim's bringing up a really key point. I can use an instance. I think very personally, like I know someone who I've forgiven, and I see this person on a not so infrequent basis, and every time I see him, I'm reminded of some past injustice, and I forgive him again. However, we are not on speaking terms. And not really by necessarily my choice. Like it's this particular person in my life has to like kind of what Jim is saying, like they've never asked to be forgiven. Whether or not they believe they've done anything wrong is something that I cannot confirm. Versus, short of pushing myself into their sphere and being like, no, I just want to check. Like the fact that you ignore me, does that mean that you don't think you did anything wrong? I need to confirm that. By the way, I've unilaterally forgiven you. Just if I just want you to know. So from relationally, I think Jim brings up a good point. Like, for there be a solid and deep connection, like there's got to be some give and take here.
There does, but it does. When he says the mandate for us is if we are offended to go to that person.
That's true. Yeah, before you go to the altar, if you are offended. As far as if I am you,
you're saying if they're offended to you, but see, if they're offended to you, you don't have to. There's no forgiveness necessary, right? We can only forgive those who have offended us.
Well, we could probably take it a little further, but for the purposes of our discussion, we'll keep it close.
Wait! What do you mean? How would we forgive somebody who hasn't offended us?
Well, that's probably a more interesting discussion about the ramifications of sin, both cosmically and interpersonally in general, not to mention intergenerationally. Anyway, that will get us on a really weird sidetrack.
Mark Teese is in the chat. What's up, Mark Teese? Hey, man!
Go ninja on, try to undo it.
I said, if you think you have forgiven a hurt, be ready for Satan to go ninja on you and try to undo it. Amen. Yeah.
I will amen corner that, Brother Teese.
Well, it goes back to what you said about it's not a one-time chop it off, right?
I'm just speaking from my experience. And I contrast that with the people that say, well, you just need to forgive and forget. I hear this all the time. Not all the time. I've heard this not infrequently with couples that have struggled with some act of infidelity. And, the offended spouse, it's a process. It's a process to kind of mend from that kind of betrayal. And oftentimes that betrayal actually triggers and creates PTSD-like symptoms. It's textbook.
Remind me what those symptoms are.
So hypervigilance, intrusive thoughts, difficulty sleeping.
Sometimes panic attacks, right?
Panic attacks. Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. Big mood shifts from like
Swings,
depression, anxiety, anger, all over the place. And so it's really easy, especially for a guy that just wants, things to go away. Well, I wish he would just forgive and let it go. Forgive and forget, or even better, forgive and let it go. Like it's some kind of bird. It ain't like that. That's not, our bodies don't work like that.
No, because it's a scar, right? Scars don't just go away.
They don't.
Wounds. Wounds don't just go away. They start to. They can.
I like a wound. I mean, here's the thing that's beautiful about a wound and scar metaphor, and I think it's true. Scar tissue tends to be stronger than the skin that
regular flesh
exists than regular flesh. And that's true with people that overcome and bounce back from like in marriages from some act of infidelity. It's not to say that it's the end of the marriage. It actually can rebound even stronger. But it's a process and it takes time. And that it's just the nature of things. So when you forgive, Satan will take. Yeah, it's just it comes, and I think the fact that it is a process, at least for me, it's humbling.
Yeah,
it's humbling, and it's a constant reminder that I'm in need of forgiveness, and in line with 1 John chapter 1, that if I confess my sins,
it's faithful and just.
Forgive
them. That now see that's an important part. I'm glad that Jim brought up 1 John 1:9 because confession, and I think that's how reconciliation. I think that's how forgiveness is so interwoven with relationship and what I like to call spiritual connection. And that is the communication part. As we confess, we say, I feel like in my life, so much broken relationship has come from a lack of openness and open communication. Is harboring or hiding, the two H's, harboring and hiding.
Yes.
Wish there was a third H, harboring, hiding, and hating. Those are the things that bust up any kind of connection. So when
or they certainly frustrate it, right? Like it creates static. It creates tension. Like I think there can be like there is a connection there, but there's some tension. It's not necessarily an absolute disconnect.
You're right.
Harboring.
You're right.
Hiding. I don't know if there. I'm curious. I might have to come with another H for you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's a word that starts with an H that basically says telling the other person what I think they want to hear. I've seen that a lot, right?
Yes.
Like, how's it going? Oh, everything's good.
Like
when
bluffing, or not even bluffing. Yeah. You're right. There, we need a word for that.
I'm sure there's one, but does it start with an H? Can we keep it alliterated? I don't know. Because we do it all the time, even in reasonably, innocent ways. We feel like we don't want to burden somebody. Man, how you doing? Mm-hmm. I'm all right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing okay. It's like if I told you what's really going on, I'd feel like I was throwing some heavy weight on you. But we'll just keep it. We'll keep it right here.
I mean, and there's something to be said about social pleasantries, right? I mean, there is a lot of
when you run into somebody at the gas station, you don't have 20 minutes. Or
yeah.
I'm sorry, if you don't have the time. But if you
See,
live up in the bush, then you know you've got time, right? You've got time to be like, how is it? How is it going?
well,
And the whole,
we're not living under the tyranny of the should either, of the plans, the daily planner, and the soccer game, and the meeting, and the phone call, and the Zoom call nowadays. It's
call.
like,
Yeah, sure.
uh there is a certain but okay, but to get back to the connection piece of it, forgiveness, I do think, oh well, that does, so that, okay, that brings something else about forgiveness. Have you ever been in a situation when somebody is talking to you and you realize that they just yearn for relationship, right? And you feel torn because I'll say because I want to be somewhere else at that point. I have something else, somewhere else to be.
Uh-huh.
And yet,
Sure.
there is, and I feel like there's an aspect of like a process of forgiveness in that, where if I'm not careful, I start hating, and not hating is a strong word, but it's like watered down hate, where it's like, this person is ruining my life right now.
Well, right. It was like, so and so is
Irritating, yeah.
irritating me. They're like a pebble in, they're like a rock in my shoe right now. Um, I had one of these Monday night. I was on the phone with a guy, um, the IT guy at work, who, right as I need to go, work with a couple, he proceeds to, want to tell me some story, which I figured I'll give you 5 minutes, but then I had to go. But he just kept on and on and on. So no, I think I've got a sense of what you're talking about.
Right? It's like there's a certain offense there that if I'm not careful, I feel like there is some forgiveness there, which I have to say, God hasn't ordained me to just, the mandate isn't for me to be at my appointments, or I think what I was trying to do, what he was, because it was, again, as somebody at work, it was just somebody who I called to check up on, it was like a business call, right? And they just wanted to go on and on, and you could tell there was a need there, right?
Yeah.
I could tell.
Oh,
I thought
sure,
I could tell.
sure. And that's the hard thing. It's like, yeah, on the one
Yeah.
hand, I can say, like, man, you're irritating me because you you're causing me to have an emotional reaction to what's going on, because I want to go, I want or need to go do something else. And to a certain degree, this is the hard part, especially if you're dealing with people, is this is a being made in the image of God,
Yes.
right? Like, this
Yeah.
is an eternal being here in the flesh right now. Um,
Yeah.
I think the struggle becomes like when that eternal being in the flesh here and now has to be prioritized against other eternal beings in the flesh here and now.
Yeah.
But
But there is an aspect that I do believe, Reverend Pastor Fitch used to talk about, Reverend Dave Fitch used to talk about being able to be sensitive and observant in the moment, and stick with that moment. What is God doing in this moment? I think it's crucial to the kingdom of God. And it's something, there is something in that meeting of me wanting to get on with my things, and you're right that this is a person, this is someone, their sphere, their world, their universe is colliding with mine at this moment, and for a certain reason, and maybe for maybe it could be, from a counseling perspective, where do I go? Boundaries, right? It's like maybe just because they need me to acknowledge them, respect them enough to set boundaries.
For sure.
That's a possibility.
It can be. Yeah, it's difficult because there's an aspect of which I know I owe no other man anything and everything. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
from a Godward perspective, it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, and of course I say that, and I mean that almost, not to be, I think antinomy would be the word I would prefer as opposed to paradox, or even, put them in a yeah. So they're laws that are set against each other, that are irreconcilable.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to paradox. Yeah.
Okay.
That's one.
I like that. Tim.
Or
learn
a
new
even,
word.
Or even as a dialectic.
Yeah.
Though
going back and forth.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like antithesis, thesis, synthesis, kind of paradigm.
Interesting. Dialectic.
That's got sometimes distasteful roots. Hegelian dialectics.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Depends on
your bent, right? Like in the classical conversations, it's not a bad thing. In fact, it's what we work up towards. We do have, Scott says, boom, humor, to humor someone. Hide. What were they? Hide, harbor, or humor them.
Or to humor.
I like that.
Thank you, Scott.
That's so good.
That's good.
Good job.
Yeah. I mean, because in like humor in a false sense, like
not like humor, haha, but yeah. Interesting. What are you looking at? What are you reading there?
I'm reading through the Sermon on the Mount, man. I'm just keep glancing at it. There's something I'm trying to.
Something. There's a key in there,
huh? See, that's what I was looking for.
What was it?
Well, there is kind of like this in the Sermon on the Mount. There's this kind of overarching. When I use the term divine imperative, and you even mentioned the Lord's Prayer, which Jesus offers a slight commentary to his own written prayer, wrote prayer. Truly, if you forgive people their offenses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive people their offenses, neither will your Father forgive you.
That's severe, right? When you think about it.
Yeah.
That's no joke. Like there is an imperative there. There is a
but even
quid
like
pro quo.
You have heard that it was said, "You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I tell you, love your enemies and bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for those who mistreat you and persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust. And so if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? So that was the part that I was kind of struggling with when earlier, as far as like who's got the imperative to reach out, who's going to be the bigger man, so to speak, the person that's offended or the person who can forgive. And maybe I'm just going to just say it's responsibilities on everybody, and forgive everyone that you can.
And in that we'll find beauty, right? We will find both a better connection with God and a better connection with other people. And the connection piece I just thought of like connection of like the antenna, right? Like our antennas will be much more in tune with God and other people. I do believe that in forgiveness, lack of forgiveness like disrupts and obfuscates communication.
Because
or reception, right?
Right. Well, how else can we receive God's forgiveness unless we practice it?
Man.
because our attempts at this are, silly child's play compared to, the compassion and forgiveness we receive in Christ. It's rinky dink. What we're doing, what we're talking about is rinky dink in comparison.
Well,
token.
that makes yeah. Yeah, you're right. Do you think, in your in counseling, in your experience with counseling, when somebody's having a difficulty connecting with other people, is much of it rooted in a lack of forgiveness? Is there a commonality there?
So yeah, no, that's an interesting question. I have to think about that one for a second. And the hard answer is yes, because, and I'm just trying to think through some circumstances that I've seen, because it's not the lack of forgiveness that's the problem; it's the act of judgment that's the problem. When you've forgiven somebody, you're not judging them anymore. You've actually given
they're
them,
mutually exclusive, right?
No, forgiveness and judgment are mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
When you sit with somebody that all they frequently talk about is the things that other people do that they find to be offensive or wrong, what you find is that when that is the standpoint, that it's difficult to connect with somebody when you're judging them.
Yeah.
It's just why, like from an emotional level, I frequently invite people to try to be as vulnerable as possible, because that's easier to connect with, right? Because if you're like, well, Judah, I swear every time you say whatever, I mean, it just drives me up a wall, versus, Judah, when you talk about time like that, man, it really makes me sad.
Or talking about the vulnerability, pain, right? Like, when that really hurts.
Yeah, that hurts. When you talk about time like that hurts. And I'm kind of being tongue in cheek here for but hopefully you get the gist. Like, it's one thing if I'm making an accusation and I'm judging or condemning you. It's another thing when I reveal the impact that
right.
The vulnerable, if I make myself vulnerable by revealing the impact of that action, it's much easier to connect. And then obviously, if I came in and said, if I rolled it all in together, like, wow, Judah, last week when you talked about time, I was just cut to the quick, and it hurt me. And I thought you said some evil things, and I forgive you.
It's much more inviting, right?
It can be. It's much more connecting, right? Or it's certainly an invitation to connect.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I've seen that's kind of challenging is opposite. Not necessarily an opposite per se, but so yeah, when we find ourselves in a stance where we're judging or condemning others, i.e., not forgiving, it makes it difficult to connect. And then sometimes it's difficult to accept forgiveness.
Yeah.
It's difficult to accept compassion. It's difficult to accept that offer. Because it can be humbling or humiliating. I don't know. It really it can challenge our sense of self, depending upon what that sense of self is.
Well, it takes it out of our control, right? If somebody forgives me, that's completely out of my control. I have a hard time. I have a hard time accepting it, because I want to do something about it. I want to, right? Like, I want to make up for it. And so, don't forgive me yet. Let me make up for it.
Well, making amends, I think, is a different. I mean, in my mind, as I conceptualize Like
That's true.
forgiveness, reception, amends. Those are separate like steps in a process.
Yeah.
But to accept forgiveness means that I have to agree with you that I'm guilty of something.
Right.
And then it also may have to, if my sense of self is kind of puffed up because I'm having a hard time really accepting who I am as I am, that I'm fallible, that I make mistakes, maybe even go beyond that and like transgress, right? Like it's one thing when I sin accidentally, it's another thing when I sin by omission, like not doing what I should or could do, but when I'm just an outright, sinner, boundary breaker, transgressor. To
Well,
accept forgiveness means I've got to own that. I've got to accept
Yep.
that that's I can do that. I do that sometimes. That's who I am. When
Yep.
in the past, right? And that starts to creep into the present.
Well, that I want to get to the last thing I want to talk about is forgiving ourselves. But first, Mark Teese back in the chat says you can experience forgiving through suffering. Same. Suffering unlocks a lot. Well, I think
that one I would very quickly agree with. Suffering unlocks a lot. Even Jesus learned obedience through the things which he suffered.
There we go.
Ponder that from the Epistle of Hebrews.
That's a tough one, right? I mean, how did Jesus?
I love that verse because I don't know exactly what it means. And it makes me go, why am I avoiding the suffering? Now, Judah, on the other hand, he's a masochist. He looks for the suffering. I'm like, I don't know about no suffering. Yeah. Judah's like, if it ain't got no suffering in it, no suffering, no gain. I don't want it.
I was gonna say you're coming over to my way of thinking with that verse. But even in this the idea of suffering, what I find, when talking about counseling, something that I found, I had a good counselor friend of mine that said he opened my eyes to the importance of self-love. And because, just the idea of self-love feels a little too mamby-pamby for me. And so I guess I was resistant to that, but talking about, he broke it down in terms of being able to care for yourself the way you would somebody else, and forgive yourself the way you would somebody else. Like, it's how hard it is to forgive others when we don't forgive ourselves. And for some people, they'll forgive other people willy-nilly, and they'll just hold these wounds, these self-inflicted or not even self-inflicted. And I tend to fall in this camp, is that, like, when you're talking about your memory and stuff, the things that come back to me are not things that people have done to me, but the embarrassing things, or the just, the shameful things that I've done. Those are the things. And I tend to fall into the camp a little bit more, so I can understand when people talk about.
But
go ahead.
I mean, I hear you, and I guess what I'm wondering is, just like we talked about, like you said, you were curious, like, do people that don't forgive have difficulty connecting? And I had to think about it for a second. I was like, what I find is more so what gets presented to me is this spirit of condemnation and judgment. But just like I don't know, I probably do fall in that. I'm not a big fan of self-love. I maybe I like to think of it more along the lines of self-compassion.
I think that's a better way to say it.
But, or not but, and it, how do people, and I should say, like, how do others, how do you deal with self-condemnation and self-judgment?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I mean, like just you said, you're like, well, the things that really stick out in my memory are these shameful things that I've done, and it's like, but what when I'm confronted with it, when I encounter this memory, what do I meet it with?
Mm-hmm.
Do I meet it with compassion, or do I meet it with condemnation? And by condemnation, not simply by saying that it was a shameful act, but that I condemn myself now.
Mm-hmm.
I condemn myself now for that.
Yeah.
Like I can like every day I think of that, I just condemn myself. And well, of course, we the fruit of that is ugly. Um,
Well, as you said before, wounding is not a one-time thing, and therefore forgiveness is not a one-time thing.
I think
Right? It's
from yeah. I mean, as human beings,
yeah.
We here's the struggle, right? Like we remember, and we have these emotions and thoughts
Mm-hmm.
that are aroused by this memory,
Mm-hmm.
and the body only registers pain in one way: physical pain, emotional pain. It's all the same.
Yeah.
Registers it one way. So that aspect of wounding, right? Like if like
Yeah.
even though we're talking about wounds you can't see, which is a real thing, and it's a real thing because the body only registers pain one way.
So is that true? That's very interesting to
No, it's
me.
true. No, that's extremely true. Which is
The
why,
body only registers pain in one way.
yeah, physical and emotional pain are registered the same exact way, using the same parts of your brain and the same parts of your body. Which is why we
However,
can use psychological means to reduce chronic pain issues
I get that.
without medication.
What about those studies that show that men and women experience physical and emotional pain differently? Like their bodies and their psyches are wired in different ways. That men will remember clearly the experience of being kicked in the testes, uh, but women forget physical pain much easier because if they held on to the crystal clear memory of bursting forth with a child, they might.
That's why mine are all spaced out 3 years, because it would take about
It takes about 3 years to forget that.
well, it would take about 2 years and 3 months approximately for my wife to forget the pain of the previous childbirth.
But they say that. So I've seen psychological studies that have said that women, though, they remember crystal clear offenses, emotional, relational offenses. Uh, I don't think that disagrees with the idea that pain is experienced in our body the same way. Those two pains are just pains.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's the way we categorize them and remember them, right?
Well, it has to do with significance.
Mm.
And women are much more relationally wired.
Yeah.
Generally,
We paint with a broad
men.
brush.
With a broad brush.
Yeah.
I have to go dig around on that because I'm not familiar, particularly with studies of which you speak. But,
Well, I guess it's also the stories we tell, right? And I like how you put it in terms of significance, because it's like a, a guy's significance coming, like, oh man, that time I was hammering that nail and I put the nail right through my finger, is like, that's much more of a significant memory than that time Bobby, he was, he called me. I can't even think.
well,
of
I
it.
think there's thresholds. I mean, like that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think through clinically some things that I've seen where, on an individual level, yeah, I think we'll just talk about guys in particular. It, yeah, there's certain things that for them will reach a level of significance to where it's embedded in the memory.
Yeah.
On relational and emotional perspective. I'm just thinking here from where I live in Appalachia and what I lovingly refer to as good old boy or redneck culture, feud culture. Yeah,
Feud culture.
yeah, because
Huh.
like there are things socially there like there's all
Mm,
kinds of things that you can do socially that are unacceptable but are forgivable.
interesting.
But there's either a level or it reaches some level of significance to where it becomes subject to an emotional cutoff. And what you'll hear on like on when I say like a feud level is they're dead to me.
Hmm.
Well, Billy Bob did this and he's dead to me, which means I don't do any business with Billy Bob. I don't talk to Billy Bob. I may even avoid Billy Bob's relatives. Um, when I talk about this kind of stuff with folks that live here, um, they know exactly what I'm talking about. They'll do this. They don't start doing the head nodding. They're like, "Yeah, you know exactly what that is." I'm like, "Uh huh." Yeah, I call it redneck justice is my moniker for it. There's a sense, there's a very black and white, and we all do this in the sense of like there is a sense of right and wrong, but redneck justice has a certain sense of like right, wrong, and unforgivable.
Interesting.
And that may be true in all cultures, but
Hmm.
I'm contextualized. These are my people. I'm not from.
Mm.
I'm not. It's when I say I'm not from here. I've grown up in the South. Um, from a historical perspective, like
Right down the road.
my people are, yeah, my people are originally from here.
Yeah.
They kept moving west a little bit and stopped in Texas, but they're not too much different. They got a little more of that Midwestern.
I didn't realize you have roots in Texas.
And
What part?
my father's from Dumas, which is in the
Oh,
Panhandle, and then Weatherford,
wow.
Paris, near the Texas Oklahoma border of like
Well,
mid central Texas. My great grandmother um, was from that part of the world.
my my dad's from Corpus Christi. My grandpa hailed from Willis. I think Willis, Texas.
So yeah, very very
It's near
Midwestern.
Houston.
Yeah,
Huh?
my folks are more
Yeah.
started getting the plains. And my grandfather
Hmm.
was quintessentially Midwestern, stoic,
Interesting.
stoic. My conversations with him over the telephone consisted of, "How are you doing? How is the weather? How is school?" And I would ask him how the cows were, and that was like, "Well, it's good to talk with you. We'll talk to you later. Love you, Grandpa." Huh?
Cows. Huh.
Yeah, Doc. He's a large animal vet. Everyone called him Doc.
Oh, cool.
Um,
Interesting.
wore the same. They had a uniform. I mean, he was I don't know how to describe it. It was just a character. Character.
Yeah. Well, oh, look at that. Scott was born in Fort Worth.
Fort Worth. All these boys from Texas. My grandmother was from down that way, Fort Worth, Dallas.
Jim says, "Is Texas a connection, guys?" Yeah,
It's
I mean,
yeah. It's like a connection.
that's, and that is, I think there is something important. When I'm working with young men who struggle with social competence, one of the things that is hard to teach is without because I work with guys that lack a certain amount of curiosity. And without curiosity, it's really difficult to connect with other people because it's hard to find those points
Right.
of commonality, right?
Yeah, you're trying to find some shared experience. Like I'm getting curious. Like, well, so where are your people from? Right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you
Oh
start
yeah, my
mentioning,
people
oh
from
man,
Texas too. Oh, okay, well now we have that in common. Um,
yeah,
yeah, no, and it builds a foundation that you can, at that point have you can hang together and have differences, right?
yeah,
You can be united and different. Um,
yeah.
unity and diversity.
Unity within diversity. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it's been a good conversation. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Scott and Jim and Mark. Who else was there? There was somebody else was in there. Scott. Yeah, Jim. Oh, well, we had a few people that were watching. Julie and Roxanne were watching, so appreciate your guys' thumbs up. And another good conversation. You know what I noticed last week? We didn't get a lot of views. I think one of the main problems is I forgot what we were going to talk about, and I put Judah and Josh talked about nothing. And nobody wants to tune in for nothing.
Well, we could have a long discussion about nothing. Like, actually, it wouldn't be there very long, would it? Like, is nothing a thing?
Is nothing. Well, actually, there is something about that. I would like to talk about at some point. Where what is in the space? What is in space? How does light go through nothing?
or does it? Yeah.
Well, it does.
But wouldn't nothing be something if it was something other than nothing?
And that will have to be answered another night
by somebody smarter than me.
And me. All right, brother. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
See y'all next week, if the Lord's willing. And the creek don't rise.
Dang it! I should have had it ready so that we just